going to talk about events. And this isn't big events, this is small events. So hopefully it still fits within the theme of the forum today. My name is Rhiannon. I teach in MIB and also in the Graduate School of Management as well. My background is in organizational theory and management theory, but I found myself teaching in international business and marketing. So this is one of the reasons why I actually ended up using an event in order to facilitate teaching in areas where I'm not potentially an expert. There's a clicker today. So the 20-minute discussion that I want to have initially is to talk about events. What do I mean by events? Why do I think events can be helpful? Then I want to give you an example. It's a very contextual example, but I want to extrapolate insights from that example, which I hope you'll find useful. So I'll talk about the context of this example, and then have some kind of overviews of the different things I think we can take from it and use in different contexts. So I'll evaluate the event that I used and then give a few suggestions about how to keep events small so that they don't take all of your time up when you're trying to organize them. And then we'll have some questions. Scalability, I think, is an interesting thing to discuss as well. So the what and why of events. So initially, I teach in the graduate school and I teach in quarters. So quarters are 10 weeks. In week 4 of quarter 1 this year, I was asked to do an event for my students to be run in week 5. So that put a bit of time pressure on. That gave me basically 7 working days to produce an event, to run it, to get the rooms booked and so on. And luckily the GSM have some amazing professional staff, but this was still a very big ask. Also, I'd never run an event before, so I didn't really know what I was doing. So the first thing I asked myself is, okay, what is an event? What is it? What is it that I'm trying to create? And obviously, the first thought that I had was buffets. There are always buffets. So I started trying to design my event, and I was coming up with things like, okay, well, I know that this event, part of the reason why the GSM wanted it was to raise awareness of a particular course. So I run quite a unique course, which I'll explain a bit later on. And the GSM wanted to raise the awareness of this course across the staff and across the university, so across MIB, across GSM, across marketing, across multiple disciplines. And I thought, okay, well, if I want to raise awareness, then I want to show off what my students are doing. So I want to give my students a space and a platform to impress the audience in some way. Maybe there'll be a buffet. At this point, I don't know how to organize a buffet, and I've given up. But I was thinking, okay, well, my students then can take maybe 5-10 minutes, and they come up and they explain to the audience all the amazing things they're doing. Sorted, easy, off I go to write up my schedule and to disseminate it across the department. And I wake up the next morning and I think, but what about the students? What are they getting from this? This is a vanity event. This is me just showing off. This is my students just showing off. Where's the value here? Aside from presentation skills, and maybe a feeling of empowerment that those students might get from showing off, what are they really getting from this event? And so I'm one day into my 7-day arrangement schedule, and I think, I've got to go back. I've got to rethink this. So when I was thinking about, okay, with this new mentality then, what is an event? Well, I see it outside of normal class time, I see it outside the normal format of class times, and I see it as a one-off. So it's a one-off way to add value in some way for the students. It's centered on a particular topic. So I thought, well, what are the students struggling with right now? What's the most difficult thing that's facing them at this current moment in time, and how can I make that situation better in some way? How can I improve that situation? And I wanted students to be center stage. I wanted them to be creating and determining the content. So because this was different to a lecture, it wasn't me saying this is what you shall learn, it's them saying this is what I need to learn, and taking control over that event format and that event content in some kind of really valuable way. So I started to see the event not as a vanity event, but as a way of fully maximizing value for students who might be dealing with certain issues at a particular time in their study. And so I wanted to provide the students space to tap into the knowledge and expertise of others. So events are sort of a facilitated interaction of multiple groups, rather than just a chance to show off. And in doing this, I still think it will raise awareness of the course. You know, I still think that the audience will get to see how great my students are, but my students also get some value from this event. And you know what was really fun as well? That I had ultimate creative control. It was my event. I didn't have ultimate control over, I suppose, what room I was in, or these kind of very structural factors, but I could choose how I wanted my students to interact with my audience. So I kind of loosened up a bit and thought, oh, what could be fun to do? What could be really interesting to try? So before we get into the details then, some of you might be thinking, well, aren't events big? Isn't this going to take up most of my time? Aren't I going to have to organize so many things, facilitate it, run it, provide the content for it? And my answer here is no. No, really, you book a room and you invite people to that room. That's as simple as an event can be. I booked a room and I invited people to that room. And I gave them briefs about what I expected them to do whilst they were in that room. That's all the event was. Luckily, also, the professional staff did provide a buffet at the end. But it wasn't, it wasn't a main part, it wasn't a priority. So I would say that overall this took me maybe 3 or 4 hours to organize, writing briefs, organizing and planning. It was only a 2-hour event outside of class time. This was for a small class, mind. So this was for a class of 11 students. So I want you to keep that kind of context in mind, which is why I think it's probably important to extrapolate wider learning insights from this. But no, it wasn't big, and it didn't take up a lot of my time because I focused on students creating content, not myself creating content. Okay, so the class, the context is really important here. So I'm organizational theory, OB, management theory. My students are international business and marketing, and they're in the same class. So there are 11 students, 7 of them are international business, 4 of them are marketing students. They go and do consultancy projects. So for the first 3 weeks, I'm working with them to develop project briefs and research questions. For 5 weeks, they then go off into their companies. So they're gone. They're out of my hands for 3 days a week. They're in companies, and then on Friday, they're in supervision. So I don't really see them, aside from the supervision at the end of the week. I use e-portfolios to track their progress throughout, but that's also digital, so I don't tend to see them much face-to-face when they're away. Also, all their projects are different. So these 11 students could be in 11 different companies doing 11 different projects. Someone's looking into moving into China with e-commerce, another student is looking at a marketing strategy for a software company in New Zealand. Another student might be looking at distribution channels to reach Australia. So there are a huge variation in projects, which means there's a huge variation in theory. Now these students have to write reports, so they have to write an intro, a literature review, a methods chapter, findings, discussion, and recommendations. So they have to do in 10 weeks a full research project where they go into a company and come up with solutions or recommendations for that company. And they've never done any of this before. They've never done it before. So in week 4, when I was asked to come up with this event, what were they struggling with? Well, they'd been in the company for 1 full week. They'd already written some literature review, and then they'd gone into the company and realized everything that they thought might be wrong. They thought every literature theory that they liked, or that they had been taught, they're trying to kind of force it to work. They desperately want it to work, but it's not working. It's not working. Their theory on service-dominant logic isn't fitting their project, but they love service-dominant logic. So they're trying to force a square peg in a round hole. And I need them to step away and go and explore other theories, but they don't know what's available to them. So at this point, they're trying to bring together initial bits of data with the knowledge that they have, plus they're stressed, they have this big time limit and they've never done this before. So that's what they were struggling with at this point. And myself, not as an international business expert or a marketing expert, I can offer a lot to these students for their consultancy project, but I can't offer the sort of really intricate expertise that academics specialize in these fields can offer. So how do I leverage the expertise of people who are specialized in these fields? And how do I pair that expertise with the students so that they can get as much as they need from these people? So I needed something quick, I needed something easy, and I needed something really valuable. So this is what I came up with. So it's 2 hours, 2 stages, and 2 rooms. And I called it the Consultancy Symposium because the second part is sort of based on a PhD symposium I went to at the Academy of Management. So the stage 1 is all 11 students do 5-minute presentations, really quick, somewhere between 3 and 5 minutes. These presentations focus on, these are my research questions that I have to answer for the company. These are the theories which I initially wanted to apply and I know about, and these are the problems I'm experiencing. Well, my theory doesn't work. Is there another theory which would work better? Is there a reading that I've missed which would make all this make sense to me somehow? And the audience is academic staff from MIB, from marketing, and from the GSM. So I brought together as many people as possible from the different areas. And these people have the expertise that maybe I don't have. And then once they've done their 5-minute presentation, they move to a different room, they have a little bit of a break, and there are tables set up, and at each table there's an academic staff in international business or in marketing. And the students are paired up, and they have discussions with these academics, and every 15 minutes they move to another table and have a discussion with another academic. And 15 minutes they move to another table. So they've set up their problems, and then they're put in a situation where they can discuss these problems. But the students are told to take charge. So they have to identify the issues that they're having. Not me, they do. So they have to be introspective and reflexive and say, this is the problems that I'm having. And then they have to take the lead in finding solutions for these problems through discussion with academics who specialize in that field. So I'm not doing any content. Honestly, I booked a room and invited people to it. But the students are taking control. They're saying what they need, and they're out there to get what they need. Planning, this is how I planned it. A lot of paper. I would say if anybody wants to do any of these kind of rotation-based events, make sure you know exactly where students are going to go and just tell them to go there. I would not leave it up to, standing in the room shouting, go! And then expect them to self-organize. That would be a nightmare. I had fairly strict table numbers. I told the students in advance, these are the academics you're going to see. I told the academics in advance, these are the students you're going to see. Partly as well because when they were doing their presentations, the academics could choose to focus on those students who they knew were going to come and see them. So there was some element of planning. This was the neat version of maybe 5 other messier versions of me attempting to organize this. So I would say this is probably the time pressure here, is figuring out who's going to move where. And I also, when I was pairing the students, I was thinking about, okay, these guys have to lead discussions. So if I have a very introverted student, who am I going to pair them with? So I did think about the personalities of the students, as well as the different lecturers that they're going to meet. So quite often, if there was someone chatty, I'd put them with somebody who was maybe a little less confident, and that seemed to work very well. So I played around. I did a bit of social engineering with my students for this. So I know it's a very specific context, but I think there are some really valuable things that we can take out of this. So overall, the event ran very smoothly. I know there are some people here who went to that event, so I'm not lying. And well, these are the 4 things that I think we can take from it. So the problem identification was really, really useful for these students. The co-creation of solutions with academics. Oh, no, we're fine. No, we're not. Yeah, we are. academic skills and professional skills as well. So there was quite a few outcomes which I think can only be got by making this event interactive rather than vanity. So the first, and I think probably the most important outcome for me, was this ability for the students to identify their own problems. So these students do have a tendency to send me drafts and ask me what's wrong with them. Here's my draft, can you tell me what's wrong? And that is not something that I should be doing for them, because they really need to be able to do that themselves. They need to be able to troubleshoot what they've written in order to be proactive about fixing things. So I really wanted to kind of put emphasis for them on, when you're creating your presentations, you need to decide what you're struggling with, because you need to figure out what you need help with. And this was great for them. And I saw almost immediate improvements in the way that they were handling their drafts, in the way that they were looking to help themselves, not just looking for me to help them. Given the ambiguity of their projects, given the individualized nature of their projects, they really need to be able to help themselves. And so this reinforced that. And when you can help yourself and you can identify your own problems, you can then be really independent in your learning. So you can say, this is what I'm struggling with, but it's my responsibility to go out and find a way to overcome this thing that I'm struggling with. And it's the movement of responsibility from my shoulders to them. The responsibility of learning is not all on me to teach them, it's on them as well to be able to teach themselves. So they took some responsibility for their own learning by doing this, this event. The individualized content, well, it was necessary because they're all doing something different, right? So they're all going to have different problems. They're all going to want to use different theories to come up with different recommendations. And so if I was to create an event, I would say, okay, well, we're all going to learn this today. But by problem solving and using that content to guide what they were going to learn, everything they learned was relevant to their individualized situation. So everything that they learned through the discussion helped them with their specific problems that they'd identified in their presentation. So the content became customized rather than generic. I can only create generic, but they could create customized content for themselves. And they really started to feel ownership. These projects are terrifying for these students. They are very, very brave students. But when something's scary or ambiguous, you can tend to kind of back away from it or try and disassociate yourself with it. And these students have a tendency to do that. Oh, these projects are separate from myself. Rhiannon will help me figure them out. And by doing this presentation, they actually found themselves gaining more ownership over their project. They felt, okay, it's actually my responsibility. So it's a really good way to make them feel in control. So problem solving really, really helped these students. The next really important outcome, I think, was the co-creation of solutions between the students and the academics. So the students found it really interesting because when they were sat with these academics, they could see the thought processes that the academics were going through. So the students would say, well, I have this problem. I have this problem that I can't, this theory that I like doesn't seem to fit the situation I found myself in. And the academics would go, well, have you considered this theory? Because this theory might give you insight into how you might fix this. And what was amazing for the students was that they suddenly went, oh, so that's how theory relates to practice. That's how I apply theoretical frameworks. It's not just this abstract thing, but when I was talking to the academics, they showed me through the way they were thinking aloud, through their thought processes, how to actually apply this theory to this problem. So in co-creating the solutions of their problems, they were able to see how that kind of theory and practice relationship worked. So that was really, really useful for them. And finally, and this is the one that I was so thankful for, by talking to multiple academics across different tables, 2 international business academics and a marketing academic, for example, they were able to see that none of them agreed. None of them had the same answer. And I have a tendency to get frustrated with my students because they say, well, what do you want to see? And I say, well, what do you want to write? They say, well, no, but what's the thing that you want? What's the theory that you want? I'm like, well, I don't have anything that I want. I want you to answer the question in a way that works for you. I want you to choose a theory that you think is appropriate and apply that theory because you're interested in it and because it works and because it's appropriate. So I don't have one theory that I want you to apply. You have to go and find out. And by doing this, at the end I had one student come up to me and say, but they all said different things. They all gave me different theories. And I said, well, which one were you most persuaded by? Whose argument was strongest to you? Whose argument resonated more with how you see the world and how you see the problem that you've identified? Which solution fits best with your view of the problem? And they're like, oh, okay, yeah, no, I think what this person said actually worked for me. I said, well, go and do that then. Go and build on that, go and develop that. But they recognize suddenly that there are so many different ways of analyzing something. That these frameworks are not there to tell you exactly what to do, or there's not one best framework for one best situation, but that there's multiple options and they have to pick the one that works for them. So that was a really useful thing for them to see. I think it's like choose your own adventure. Which theory do you want to go down? So in terms of evaluation then, ultimately students reported really positively about the event. The short presentations were lacking finesse. They only had a couple of days really to do them. Also, by pairing students with extroverts and introverts, some students dominated discussion, so I might have to think about how to do that. And I think it did require a debrief. I'd have liked to add maybe half an hour at the end for me to debrief the students on how to cope with all the things that they learnt. Because when students did come up to me and say, well, now there are 5 different answers to my question, and I was just looking for one, I need to then be able to debrief them and say, but that's okay, right? Because you can just pick which one you like. So I think probably a debrief would have been good. So finally, how I think I was able to keep this small, I maintained a very narrow focus. The whole point of it was to allow students to identify their own problems with literature reviews. So their presentations were based on literature, their discussions were based on literature, everything was about that particular problem. And I avoided adding bits on. I also created the framework but not the filling. So this co-creation of solutions meant that the students took charge of content, the students took charge of discussions, they learned professional skills, they learned academic skills, but I didn't create that content. So that kept it small for me as an organizer. And I made sure that everyone had very specific briefs. So I didn't get emails going, so what have I got to do again? What do you want? I made it very, very clear straight away exactly what I expected them to do. So the admin was fairly light. So with this in mind then, thank you. I hope that some of the insights there were really useful. And if you have any questions or any thoughts, ask away.
Can I start with a question?
Yes.
Did you the lecturers who were involved, did you have a chance to speak with them and ask them about their experience? Because that's a different sort of teaching, isn't it? When you're not prepared, you don't know what the student's going to ask you. So did you have a chance to find out how they felt about the event?
I did, so there was actually a buffet and wine at the end. And the staff that were involved did come and have a chat with the students afterwards and had a chat with me. So yeah, I did get some feedback from the staff. And they just found it very interesting. So it did raise awareness for the course in quite a positive way. Because the staff got to see the huge variation in projects that the students do, and they also got to really meet those students. Doug was there. So.
Yeah, can I just say, I found it to be really rich for a 2-hour seminar. For so many years, I've been to so many things where you listen to a PhD student talk about their proposal or a master's proposal, and it's always one way, and then you ask a couple of questions. This was surprisingly rich, considering you were not spending that many minutes with each student. You saw their 3-minute presentation, and then you had the 5 minutes or 10 minutes with them, 15 minutes at the table, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But you really almost, it was like speed dating. You almost got to know these students. And it was a little uncomfortable at first, because the first half you listened to these presentations. There were 11 people presenting. I knew that 6 of them were going to come to see me. And you'd listen to some person and they'd be going on about theories that you know inside out. And you think, yeah, I could really talk to that person. And then the next one would come up and you think, what are they going on about? You know, I've never heard of this theory. It's going to be really embarrassing sitting at the table talking to them. But then it actually wasn't. It was really comfortable. And I think having the 2 students at once, you're advising one, but there's always some overlap and they're both gaining from it. It was an interesting, really rich experience.
Yeah, and when I paired them up as well, I considered who they were seeing. So if, for example, one of the international business students was seeing you, I'd make sure there was a marketing student with them, so that there could be that kind of triad. So, oh, please, you liked it. Yes?
And what was the method of obtaining student feedback?
There was a formative feedback form. So after the event, somebody said to me, you should really gather feedback on that, and I thought that's a really good idea. So I handed out formative feedback forms, which were just sort of slightly modified. So what did you think was the purpose of the event? Did you feel like the event fulfilled that purpose? Those kinds of questions. And 100% response rate, which was nice. And they all seemed to like it. I think that discomfort at the start, I think the time limit of only 7 working days to organise and invite, the students weren't upset by that. They didn't feel like that hampered them, but they did feel like they wanted to practice their presentations with the business communications team. So they felt like they weren't able to fully practice. But yeah, there was feedback. Not from the staff though. I should have sent around feedback forms from the staff. Regrets. Yes.
Thank you very much. It's a very interesting presentation. My question was, when you will teach students like speed dating, how many lectures each student is going to say?
3.
3. So
Yeah,
you
there's 3.
organize, pre-organize, based on the subject, right?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
But so these projects do tend to have an element of international business, even if they're marketing students. How do we do marketing in this country? Or for the international business students, there does tend to be a marketing aspect because there needs to be some kind of an market analysis. So some of the international students saw the marketing lectures as well. So there was a bit of a crossover.
A little bit more kind of organizing.
Yeah, so that was very
It's quite a
structured.
challenge, isn't it?
Yeah, I couldn't quite leave that to chance, though, so I organised that quite in a very structured way. So I told the lecturers who would be seeing them, and I told the students what tables they'd be going to and who they'd be seeing.
But before, did you give lecturers some more information for the presentation, or did you have no idea?
So in terms of the presentation content, no, they had no idea.
Okay, so just
Yeah. Maybe with more time, it would be nice to send them the slides beforehand.
I guess it works really well for small kind of cohorts.
It does, yeah. With bigger cohorts, you probably want to
Something different.
change it up a little bit. Yes, Doug?
Just in terms of your goal of building awareness for the course, which is sort of the secondary goal, I think it did that really well because all of the academics who were there, I think, came away with a real understanding of what this course was and how unique it is. So I think the more you can do this again with different groups of academics, you will really get your message out there.
Well, I'm doing it next quarter, so any volunteers?
So how many staff members did you have, academics?
Actually, more academic staff got involved than I originally asked. So I invited all academic staff, maybe 15, to the presentation hour. And then I said, well, only I think 6 were invited specifically to be part of the discussions. But some of the academic staff who came to the presentations then asked to be part of the discussions. So I just put them on tables. So for some tables there were two academics when I only planned 1. So probably 7 or 8, I think, at the end in the rotation space.
So 7 academics and 11 students.
Yeah. Originally it was only 5.
It's a bit of a dream, isn't it?
Well, the nice thing, the GSM has contacts within not just the GSM but MIB and marketing. So there's quite a big pool of academics who are involved in the graduate school program, which means that you have quite a decent sized network. Yes?
So thinking about scalability in terms of bigger groups, I guess there are some courses that do group work type things. So it might be that a whole group is allowed a time span to visit. And it doesn't have to be 3 academics, it could just be 1 academic. So perhaps a whole group could do a presentation, or like I've read about some research in an overseas university where a business lecture first year paper where the students were allowed just half an hour to create some pertinent questions, the key question they wanted answered, and then go and arrive at the academic and just be able to present that question.
Yeah.
So it was a scenario where they were given just some information and then they wanted to ask specific questions of the academic, then to go and create their solution. So there are ways, I guess, of scaling this so that it's not as intensive as what you've done here with the small group.
Yes, yeah, definitely. Yeah, that would be interesting. I think the identifying your own problem and then working to co-create a solution, that's really, that's the mechanism that's occurring that's really valuable. And you can sort of dress that up in any way based on how many people you have, Anything else? Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.